Hi, I'm Alistair Shipley. Driven by the beliefs that everyone has something special to offer, I created Not So Average, the podcast that proves that you don't need to be in the top 1% to be truly extraordinary. Each episode spotlights everyday people from your community, the very individuals you might pass on the street. These relatable stories reveal that whether you're a jack of all trades or a niche specialist, we all have unique experiences and valuable lessons to share. Imagine if we all took a moment to realize we're all not so average. Let's get after it. Welcome, Not So Average, the podcast, to all our listeners out there. This week, I have a very special guest, my friend, Jennifer Aubin from Attabotics. From my understanding, this is your first podcast, or how many have you done before this?
I do them in my kitchen with my daughters all the time, but There's no camera. So This is my first.
Just all audio. Okay.
Yes.
Those discussions I'd like to be a fly on the wall for.
They're entertaining.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Jen has quite the experience in the Calgary tech scene, from starting her own company to working in other organizations as what we call as entrepreneurial as well as entrepreneurial. We're going to really get into those discussion points today, but I'm really excited to sit down with Jen for a multitude of reasons. I don't know if you know this, but you're actually a part of the reason why this podcast came to be, indirectly.
I did not know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
So, fun fact, in 2022, you asked me to speak at a high school called the STEM Institute, STEM Innovation Academy now. And so the ask was, Alistair, we need somebody who is relatable to our students, but isn't a CEO, an ex-Olympian, or a high-achieving athlete in any form. We want somebody that's more average. And it put me on a complete thought train. And here we are today, basically redefining what is average, what is success. And that was actually the starting point. So one of our mutual friends, Erin Griswold, I sat down with her, and I remember having a beer and being like, I had to rethink, like, am I average? What do I have to share with these high school kids? And then I guess it grew and picked at my brain up until now. So thank you for that.
That's fantastic. And your talk was amazing to the kids, the high school kids at STEM IA. So
yeah,
you were very inspirational to them.
It was a fun time because we sat down with the students, and my talking points were basically on finding what is your North Stars and what skill sets you want to basically evolve and create and focus on. Because at that point in time, this is kind of the beginning of ChatGPT too. Was starting to blow up in the AI world. And so a lot of people in the workplace were like, how are we going to evolve and all that stuff? And my focus was find your North Star, but make sure that it's people-oriented. So I talked about the importance of people, because at the core, people are going to be everything. And that's why we have such a good friendship, because your focus is on people as well. So,
True.
Do you dare me to get started?
I dare you.
Okay.
I'm a little bit scared. Alistair can ask me anything. I may not answer.
You may not answer? Okay, plead the fifth. So, early career, people and culture, getting into that. So you've been in the people and culture game for about 25 years. What first made you think, hey, this seems like a good idea?
I have no idea. It's not the path I wanted to go down. Yeah. I wanted to do marketing. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to do marketing and PR. And when I started my career, that's what I was doing. But I was also managing a lot of people at a really young age. And with that comes a lot of HR stuff. And that was before I jumped into the tech scene.
Was that all based here in Calgary, or where did you
That
kind
was
of
at the
get
Olympic
started?
Oval at the University of Calgary.
Okay.
So that's where my career kicked off. I think I was there 4 or 5 years. It was a long time ago now. But I was doing marketing and PR and events and really enjoyed myself.
Yeah.
But I realized in that space, it was going to be really tough for me to grow. And I had an affinity towards technology, but I didn't really know what that was. Keep in mind, this was 1999, right?
Did you go to school for anything related like this, marketing or?
So here's my career, my school path. So I did business at SAIT, and then I went to Mount Royal and did phys ed. And then I transferred to U of C into sciences. And then I dropped out. Okay. So I've got 4.5 years of post-secondary, and I'm a dropout.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting story in that I couldn't really find my groove, really thought I wanted to go into medicine, realized that's a really long path. I didn't want to be in a hospital and wasn't quite sure I was smart enough. And ADHD before people knew what ADHD was, so hence the path. And then I got introduced to the startup technology space in 2000.
Oh, so just right after or before that'd be after the bubble?
Yeah, after the bubble. And so I got a phone call from a fellow. I had worked with his wife at the Olympic Oval. And I had left there actually to pursue a slightly different career path, which I got bored with quickly. And
It'd be a general trend for most people on this show.
Yeah. And so I got a call from Dave. And he said, I want to introduce you to the founders of the company that I'm at. And that was a company called Stormworks back in 2000. And so I met Brian and Shelley Kuipers, and they were pioneers in the tech space in Calgary, and they were wonderful. And I had some amazing mentors and worked there for a couple of years. And
What makes up an amazing mentor?
they were doing things differently than what I was used to, keeping in mind I'm in my mid-20s at this point, right? But it was a completely different space than sport. It was fast-paced. There was a lot to learn, a lot to chew on, and I loved it. And it moved at a pace that worked for how I learn. And so I finally felt like I found my home.
Yeah.
And they were so welcoming, and I had a lot of crazy ideas, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have my own software company, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I didn't even know what these things meant in my mid-20s, right, in 2000. And they were incredibly supportive, and they helped grow me. Of course, I still wanted to go down that marketing path. Didn't really happen. I started doing hiring and training and firing and all of those things, and started in that people space early on. So I kept moving into that space, and I think that's where those mentors just knew where I would succeed.
Okay.
And so
Are they still around? Are you still connected with them? Do you still chat with them from time to time?
I hadn't seen Brian in a long time, and I saw him at the Junior Achievement Alberta Business Hall of Fame Awards Gala about a month ago.
That's incredible.
And it was fantastic to see him, and I ran into Shelley there and hadn't seen her in a while, but Shelley's now the founder of the 51,
Okay.
which invests in female entrepreneurs. And so they're doing some really great things in that space, and they continue to forge new paths. But there's some really amazing people there, and I've met so many people along the way. And then it was Shelley that helped me launch my first company, TechBend. And so we did technical recruiting in the technology space and HR support.
Yep.
And I had a small team, and I learned so much. I made a classic mistake of bringing on a partner in that company, because I'd already started up my software company on the side.
How is it for those that aren't in the tech space a classic mistake of bringing on a tech partner?
I brought a partner in at 50%.
Oh.
That is just bad move. Don't ever do that. And things really started to go sideways, unfortunately. My partner was going through some things, and
How would you have ideally have structured it? Obviously,
at least
hindsight being
51,
20/20.
49.
Okay. Let it vest, let him grow into the role.
Actually, you know what? That's not true. I had a shotgun clause, and what I should have done is use that. And the things would have been okay. One of the mistakes that I've made in my career, and I know it's a common mistake, is we don't act on things fast enough, right?
You see the flags, but you don't
You see the flags, and you want to
Better.
see the best in people, right? You want them to grow, and you want them to be successful. And so you maybe support them a little too much.
You become a crutch versus a partnership.
And then you end up carrying more of the weight of the world on your shoulders for them.
So you bring them on to assist you and help carry some of that load, and then in turn, you're actually increased your load by 50, 100%.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a great learning experience, but I'd already started up my software company at this point. And so the plan was to move out of TechBend and focus on my software company. And at this point, I have 2 young kids and a husband who is busy working and coaching internationally.
Yeah.
And we were going everywhere.
He's a high achieving athlete as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a busy time. It was a very busy time for us, and burnout was inevitable, but I don't know if this woman even realizes it to this day, but an amazing human, Carrie Houston, who I'd worked with off and on over the
Carrie
years.
Houston is awesome.
She is.
I haven't talked to her in ages.
I know.
Maybe I should have her on here at some point.
Absolutely, you should have
I
her
should
on
actually.
here.
It's been about, it was probably around 2014 that she wanted to hire me for a 3-2-1.
Of course.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
And how did Carrie Houston get involved or just direct you?
I was at the end of my rope with
Okay.
having the 2 companies, and I had 2 different business partners, and TechBent was still quite busy. When I started it, I think I started with 6 or 8 clients when I spun out from Material Insight, and grew it to over 50 clients. So
You're a small team.
we were busy. Yeah, we were a small team. At the peak, I think we were 6 folks. We were trying to do an acquisition at the time as well, and
How was that? That's the world that people like to play in right now. They love the VC world. They love the acquisition world. They want to know about the nitty gritties, the dirty. Why did it fall through?
And it's interesting. So with my software company, I had an investor on the line, and he was very interested. And he came with some very hard rules, which is to be expected in that
Okay.
space, of course.
Yeah.
But one of them, I believe, is that he was going to push my partner out at the time, and that partner and I were doing really well
Okay.
together. And I think
Not a tech bent.
no,
This would organize your people.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And
So the partner you wanted gone, you couldn't get rid of, and the one you wanted was being requested to be removed.
yeah,
Huh. Perfect.
I don't know if he knows that to this day, but that's okay. I haven't seen him in years, but it's all part of it, and it's part of that journey, and you learn a lot from it. So needless to say, I turned down his offer, and we continued to bootstrap, and I was working crazy hours and talking to companies all over the world that wanted to try our software, but this was before HR stuff, HR documents and information was actually in the cloud. So we were a little too early on that, and then
That's the problem with that whole curve to be an early adopter and your market's not there yet, but
yeah, and then just trying to stick with it. At this point, you're burnt out. And so back to my good friend, Carrie Houston, who I also haven't spoken to in a long time. She just sat me down at one point, and I went to her for some advice. And she sat me down and said, focus on your software if that's where you want to be. And she said, reduce your clients on the TechBent side and go in deep with your software. Go implement your software with a couple of your clients and really learn it and use it. And that was amazing. And so I did that for a while. And
so you shadowed a bunch of your clients utilizing your platform?
Actually, my CEO friend, Jeff, had me start at his company, which was Redfall Technologies.
Okay.
And later became Vigogo. And so I implemented there and worked with them and became their head of people.
Oh, so you were piloting your product as a full-time employee at this organization or kind of a consultant?
Consultant.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
a
which
good
was
approach.
really great of them too. That's when I talk about the support in the community. There's been some amazing people out there, right, along the journey, and mentors. And some people it'll sit you down and say, "Don't do it," and you do it anyways because
you have to learn it.
you have to learn it. And this is being an entrepreneur is like that. You're just going to go head first into something because whatever you're building is your baby. And you love it, and you think it's the best thing in the world, even if it's really not.
It's a really ugly baby. Yeah.
Sometimes the baby's ugly.
Oh, man. So I had a funny question because it just sparked a comment that you made when we were at Attabotics. You hate the term HR. You always brought that up. What's the story behind that, and what do you think people misunderstand most about this field? And maybe how does it relate to why you took the role as Chief People and Culture Officer versus HR, head of HR?
Well, and I think HR certainly can be a dirty word, dirty term for a lot of companies, right? It's a cost center, it's rule abiding, it's guardrails, and especially in the technology space, especially early stage, right? You don't want rules or guardrails. Like, you want to be able to go and do what you need to do quickly.
Yeah.
And
People don't want to admit that you have to actually measure people's happiness within an organization. that actually
Yeah.
plays a part.
It actually plays a part, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was just how tech continued to evolve. The technology space, it's more about the people and it's about the culture at the end of the day. And people, what's the saying? They don't leave companies, they leave managers and environments, right? And so the culture is really important and the people are really important. At the end of the day, you're not going to get it done if you don't have the people.
Yeah.
Right?
Doesn't matter how much AI you put into it. There's going to be a point where somebody's going to want to press 0 and talk to a human, and the business is still going to be operated by humans, at least in my future. I don't know about my grandchildren, but anyways. No, that's great. So obviously your path to getting into, can we say people management? Is that a
Sure.
Yeah?
Sure.
It wasn't the straightest line
No.
which is way more common, and that's the whole reason why this podcast was started, was just highlighting there are few industries or career paths where it's pretty clearly set that you have to hit these parameters. If I want to be an accountant, I have to go to school to do this. I have to do these exams. I got to do my CPA, you name it. Then there's the same thing with the doctors. There's the same thing with the lawyers. There's the same thing with the engineers. You have this clearly outlined direction, and that's fantastic. We definitely need them. Mm-hmm. My family is made up of a lot of engineers, but a lot of people's career paths deviate quite a bit to land where they do. And now you have the hindsight of 25 years experience, right? So if you had to give yourself, your younger self, a little bit of industry advice when you're getting started, what would it have been if you were a mentor to yourself?
Do a business degree.
Why?
With a minor in computer science.
Okay. Why? Are you just saying that so you cut out the science focus that you had in there for a little bit, or?
No, I think both. Looking at myself, I wish I understood technology a lot better than I do. I'm a wannabe nerd, but I'm not technical. I know you're the same. And so I think having a stronger technical understanding, I can research everything to death until you're actually in it.
Yeah, people can talk nerdy to me, but there comes a point where I'm just like, can't implement what you just said.
Exactly. I can understand at a high enough level, but I would like to be a little more technical.
Okay.
And business is always good, right? It's always good to understand the nuances of business. And I think there's certain programs out there that are better than others.
Yeah.
Right?
Fair. Okay, entrepreneurial leap from your HR SaaS venture. You went from building other people's companies to starting your own HR SaaS venture. What made you take the leap? What made you decide you wanted to be the boss?
It's funny, I've thought about this a lot and that path that I took. And so I had made it a goal in my 20s that I was going to own a software company. And that was my goal.
You wrote that down and you're just like, I'm going after it.
I'm going to do this.
Okay.
And
I picture you having a vision board. You just give me that.
No, that's too much work. No, vision board's in here. No, I'm going to create a software company.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what that was going to be, and I didn't know what that was going to look like. And so I did that. And I sold the company, and...
Was that Organize Your People?
Yes.
Nice.
So I sold it to a group out of Atlanta. I think it's gone now, but that was the goal.
Somewhere.
But it's not like I made my millions of dollars or anything. So I needed to be a little more specific in my goal setting, I think. Build software company and make millions of dollars.
It's not too late.
It's not too late.
It's not too late. Now is a better time, probably, in terms of getting VC funding.
Got a new software idea you and I are going to talk about after.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So actually, that might be a good segue for a question I never even wrote down. How is the landscape different now for the startup industry versus when you started? Because it's well renowned that Calgary, Alberta is an oil and gas hub for Canada. But the remarkable thing is when you look at the trickle-down effect, everybody thinks it makes up like a third of 50% of the jobs, but it's actually, I think it's less than 15%.
It is.
Make the supporting. But was that bigger back then in the 2000s? We know between you and I about the venture funding drastically increasing. I think it's up 1,000% in the last 10 years. So how does it look now versus back then?
Oh my goodness, it's completely different. It felt so underground 20 years ago. Like it was just such a small, everybody knew everybody. It was a very small community. But there were some people doing some really great things, and those companies have been around. You can list them all, right? The Benevities, the Soliums, R-Curve. There's a handful of those pioneers.
Smart technologies.
Smart, right?
Yeah.
And so everybody knew everybody, and back then it was almost felt like we were just trading people around, right? And there wasn't a ton of talent in the province, and people were just starting to catch on. And it almost, I didn't know anybody else that was in the industry. Like some of my best friends I've met through work now. Yeah. But back then, like everybody that I knew was either in university, Mount Royal or U of C, working there, or oil and gas. But now you go to any of these events and I look around and I'm going, who are these people?
Oh, but they know you.
There's so many people.
That's crazy. So what's been the biggest what the heck am I fucking doing moments in your entrepreneurial journey?
Oh my goodness.
I say entrepreneurial journey, but I guess it could correlate to like your just work experience.
There's been a few. Honestly, the toughest time was when I still had TechBent and I had OIP and I had 2 young kids. And I was just working crazy hours just trying to keep things going and working one company to fund another and thinking I was doing everything right and not necessarily asking for advice and not taking it. And
did you have pressures from, now obviously this isn't a topic that I'm familiar with, but like a lot of my female friends say there's expectations of them when they're female founders that they should be putting focus more so into other places outside of the business. Did you experience that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was one potential investor I had talked with, and he basically said, you're a mother, you're a wife, you're a founder, like you can't do it all, so you have to pick. It was a really weird comment, and coming from
But he probably thought it was going to be supportive or helpful or
I'm not
insightful.
sure. Yeah, and I think there was just some really strange comments around that. And even the year that, so OYP was one of the launch or startup Calgary profile companies that year. Out of the 9 of us, I thought I was the only female. And then of course, Brianne Everett was there with Orpix at the time, which I think they're doing really well still.
I have to look them up.
Yes, amazing company. And to have 2 females in the class was certainly not common.
And I've heard this before too, where they try and pit the 2 female founders almost against each other. Was that an environment? Because this was actually brought up through somebody that did another incubation program. It was almost like indirectly like you guys are now in competition for one another. Or being the only female founder in this cohort or whatever. But I've also heard like that backfired and then we became really good friends and became powerhouses together, and then they basically became supporting roles for one another. And I don't know if that ever happened.
I didn't have that experience, thank goodness, because I would have lost horribly against
She's
Brianne.
doing pretty good.
But it doesn't surprise me. Women still have an uphill battle. As much as I don't ever want to admit that or say that out loud, because I have 2 daughters and I don't want them thinking it's an uphill battle necessarily.
Having met your daughters, I don't think that they think they have an uphill battle. I
so
think
I've done okay?
Yeah, they're acting like they have a fully, I don't even know how to put it, but they're fully in belief that they are going to fucking conquer the world. It doesn't matter what it is.
And I think you know me. This is how I wanted to raise my daughters, and it's still tough out there. I like to pretend it isn't, and I like to ignore it, but there's still not as many women around the table, especially in the tech space.
Yeah. Do you have any opinions or observations as to why you think that is, or?
I do. I think there's a few things. So part of the reason I got involved with the STEM Innovation Academy, so I'm on their board of directors.
Okay.
And a big part of the reason I wanted to get involved with them is STEM education at earlier age. And
so what is STEM education?
So basically, the STEM Innovation Academy was created by Lisa Davis, who is the founder of the school. And it is a charter school. And you've met Lisa. She is amazing. Powerhouse. Absolute powerhouse. And my good friend is the founding principal there, Carrie Bloom. And I have spent quite a bit of time with these two women, and they're amazing. Lisa's concept of education in STEM and what we need to do is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Actually, you need to have her on your podcast.
I was thinking that, and
Yeah.
Carrie too.
Yeah. And what Lisa has accomplished with this school, and I don't know if you've seen the PAT results that just came out, Lisa's pushed them out through LinkedIn, but for a school that's only 3 years old, it's amazing. And of course, trying to focus on females. They have a 42 all-female first robotics team at STEM.
Jeez,
Yeah. 42 females.
Like
Students.
in competition. Wow.
Yes.
That was such a cool school.
It's huge. So I think if we can, and it is getting better. The numbers are getting better, right? I've got lots of friends whose daughters are doing sciences at school now, in university. And I think that's great. My own daughter's doing economics. There's not as many females in economics either.
Yeah.
If we can continue to show them it's a good path and where they need to be, I think we'll see those numbers increase. I think part of what happens with women is you finish school, if you go to school, or if you drop out, you start building your career, and then maybe you have a family. And then it gets a lot harder to jump in and build something, right? And you have to have the right partner. My husband has been incredibly supportive of all of my harebrained schemes. Oh.
Cal is also the most level-headed individual. I wish I could take a little bit of that. Every time I hang out with him, I was like, you are so even keel all the time. Your daughters are in your ear. Generally it's at a social gathering, so something's going on. And he's just, oh yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it just rolls with it.
Yeah, I got golf tomorrow. Like, Cal, shout out to you. You are fantastic. I wish you were my spirit animal.
That's why I had to marry a guy like that. Like, seriously, not a guy like that guy. Cut that part out. But a very grounding individual, right? So to be able to go and do all of these things that I've done, where there's been some really good years and some really bad years, and be able to grow with it. And then the other thing I think for women is, you can cut this part out too, is as women get older, we go through a shitty time hormonally.
You want me to cut this out, but this is good.
Up to you if you want to put it in.
Yeah.
But it's just more and more science coming out about women going through perimenopause and what that means for women in their mid 40s to mid 50s, right? And it's a crazy time, and the research is just coming out now. I just saw something that there was a female doctor was doing some research on perimenopause, and she had found a bunch of research on menopause, but she couldn't find a single research paper on perimenopause.
I'm not familiar with the differences, and that's probably
we can. So I've done a bit of a deeper dive, given my age and stage of life, and with my girlfriends and whatnot, and it's a crazy time. And there's more science is coming out as the younger generations go through it. I think it'll be a little bit easier. But again, there's more support needed, and the older your kids get, I had one CEO, one of my past CEOs, say to me, "Bigger kids, bigger problems." So you're dealing with the home life stuff as well on steroids sometimes, and it's a lot. So you need to have the right support system. You need to have good friends around you.
Yeah, whole bunch of stuff. I'm gonna have to go and research afterwards to be more understanding and just aware. So you and I worked together at Attabotics during a pretty wild growth years. This, I would say, is probably a key career milestone for myself. What's one of the things that you're proud of from that time, and one thing that you never want to relive?
Oh, wow. There's so much.
So backstory on Attabotics. So this is public. They have raised over $250 million through government programs as well as investors. And so in a city like Calgary that was previously oil and gas based, and it was a budding entrepreneurial ecosystem, they got a lot of notoriety very quickly and were very recognized in Calgary. You walked around, you said you worked at Attabotics, somebody's grandmother saw Attabotics on the news and knew about you. There was a lot that was going on, but I'm curious asking that question again, what's the things you're most proud of from that time, and one thing that you never want to relive?
Wow. I think most proud, that first year that I was at Attabotics, we'd hired 108 people. I was employee 19.
Yeah.
But I had started working with Scott about 6 months, just arm's length. I knew Scott from a past life.
Yeah.
Our daughters were good friends in elementary school, and they're now nearly 22. And so Scott and I had reconnected.
Yeah.
And we had a few coffees over his startup and what he was doing there. And so I came on as employee number 19, and we added 108 people in our first year.
So at that point, you had just done, correct me if I'm wrong, about Series A?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were a part of the ride for about $240 million afterwards.
Yeah. It was amazing to be part of all of that. Mm-hmm. And I worked so closely with Scott, so I got, as did you, right? We got to see everything and be at the table for a lot of those conversations. And I was just proud at how we moved from that 3,500 square foot industrial space in the Southeast, where I literally had to take calls in my car because there was one office that I shared with 3 other people. And
co-working spaces don't really work for everything.
No. Max, the dog.
No. And the dog.
Max. And 1 bathroom, 18 men and me. It was awesome. Yeah, good times. I was really proud at how quickly and effectively we hired. And not only that, like our retention in the first 3-4 years was under 5%.
Yeah.
It was amazing. We grew really fast. And of course, with that comes growing pains. And then on the other side, the regrets. And this is with any company, and one piece of advice I give to everyone, including continually to myself, is hire slow, fire fast. And hiring 108 people in 1 year is not super slow. But anyways, especially for key roles, I think you want to, goes back to the conversation we were having earlier, you want to see the best in people. You do see the best in people. And you think you're all aligned and you think you're on the same page. And you're not at the end of the day. And things start to come out and you grow so fast you can't keep up. And then you start seeing the holes in it. And alignment is critical. And when you don't have alignment, it's a problem. And people need to communicate and they need to work together be on the same page. If you're not, it's just not going to work out. It just isn't at the end of the day.
So a lot of business founders right now are making the arguments that part of the reason why communication isn't as effective is because of this whole hybrid workplace or remote first workplaces. What's your views on that? Because Attabotics I'd consider it hybrid 35%. It's like 60% of the office or more was there in person, but then there was a key grouping of people that were gone. But do you find that communication can be improved upon even if you're remote or in person or?
Honestly, I think it's all about relationship building.
Okay.
And I think...
Whose responsibility is that?
I think it's both. I mean, it definitely needs to come from the top for sure, but I think it's on both sides.
Yeah.
And I think, if you're just there to do a job and you're not super invested, which is fine too. There's lots of companies like that and lots of people like that. It doesn't need to be your life. Of course, in the startup world,
they want you to make it your life.
Yeah, and
it often does.
And it often does. And I know I will always be that person that will be hyper involved, right or wrong, to my own detriment sometimes. But I think it has to come from both sides, and you have to communicate, you have to ask questions, and you have to seek answers. And if you don't get the answers, push to get the answers. If you don't understand, ask.
You have to have the environment that makes it acceptable to ask the questions, even if you believe they're stupid. There was, I just distinctly remember, because my role, I was connected to Scott at the hip, sitting in board meetings with Fortune 500 CEOs or the biggest venture capitalists in the world. And there was a time when certainly I couldn't be asking that question in that kind of room, but I felt comfortable to be like, here on Slack or Teams, I'd fire Scott a message and be like, hey, what does this mean? And he would respond. And that was probably my MBA, was sitting there hearing this in real time, like, why is this important to this was a Fortune 50 company at one point, if you remember. Yeah. And being like, why is this important to this person? And Scott was able to respond to it. But yeah, you have to have that environment. There's definitely been times where in different companies too, you just can't ask the questions because maybe it's a little bit of imposter syndrome. You feel like you should be a lot smarter in this position, so therefore you don't feel safe to ask the question. But then there's also environments where you have tyrants that just, they'll cut you at the knees and be like, that's a fucking stupid question. And I've had plenty of employers that are the latter.
Oh, absolutely. I've had a couple of bosses in the past that, oh my goodness, scarred to this day. But you know what? Those were my biggest learning moments too. And one, learning who I want to work for, or who I want to work with, or what kind of leader I want to be, and making sure that it's a safe environment to be able to ask those questions. And yeah, sometimes they're dumb questions, but if you don't know, you don't know.
But it's a reframe too, is often if you think it's a dumb question, or if you think it's a question worth asking, there's generally, if it's in a big enough group, there's somebody else that's wondering the same thing. So I've had to learn that too on this podcast, is I'm definitely not going to know everything. That's the whole idea why I bring people on here, but asking like, what does this abbreviation mean? What does this mean? And I've learned a hell of a lot more just by asking about it. So.
Absolutely. And I learned so much working with Scott, because you could ask him anything and he would always have an answer and then some for you, right?
Or he wouldn't, and then he'd come back after the weekend and he had spent all weekend researching this particular question. I mean, it'd be a subject matter expert on it all of a sudden. Yeah, it was wild.
Oh, it was wild. And then you would know everything. Working under a leader where if you did make a mistake or you felt like the question was stupid, but the support was there to fix it, goes a long way. Because people are going to make mistakes.
That's a big part of retention. Yeah. So Attabotics is definitely known for its cutting edge tech. So that robotic solution, what was it like building up the people and culture strategies there in a high pressure and high innovation environment? Because you were getting pressures from not only the VCs, our investors, but there's also government involvement too, because their money invested, they had to seek a return, whether or not it was incentivized by them getting revoted into their position later on, I won't say. But yeah, you had a lot of pressures from all different directions.
And that's one thing about being senior in a company and with investors and other leaders and employees. There's so many different groups pulling at you, looking for something. And this group over here is looking for something completely different than this group. And so at the end of the day, you're trying to do what's right for the company. And you're trying to make everybody happy, and you're trying to manage expectations. And you're working with a cutting edge, bleeding edge technology. And
Not seen before. And it's
a really tough, delicate balance all the time. And being able to manage that is tough, and hiring that many people that quickly, and it's still being a startup. And people joining the company that have never worked in startup before, and it's tough, right? And you have to watch your spend, and you're managing so many things. It's just a continuous, delicate balance.
Yeah. So what did you use what was your state of mind or your framing of what was important and how you would deliver it to people? I don't even know where I'm going with this question, but there was a balancing act that you had to do. Was there any kind of, here's the simple facts that I'm just going to focus on, it has to be based on benefits for the company, or how did you even navigate that? That was a ridiculous question, but.
No, I get it. And I don't even know how it's done. Here's the thing at the end of the day. The culture really does come from, especially if you have a founding CEO, CTO, whoever that founding person is, they are the culture, right? So how do you work with that and enhance it and get things done timely? A lot of entrepreneurs, I've been there, we want everything done last week and we want it done perfect and we want it done this. and we want it done at half the cost. And
But do you think that's also because of the driving, it was growth at all costs was our era of VC funding?
Absolutely.
So you have to show metrics and you have to show this exponential curve or the J hook. And that's a driving factor. So if the money is coming from people that are saying this is important, then therefore it's important to the CEO and therefore it trickles down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is really what it is at the end of the day. And then trying to explain that to folks is difficult, right? And you want to be able to give people everything, but you can't. You just can't at the end of the day. And you're just trying to launch the company and get it going, and it's a balance. It's just balancing.
Oh, balance. Such a buzzword right now. Actually, let's ask you, what is balance for you? Because you did comment on the fact that you were a founder, you were a mom, you were a wife, you're high achieving in all of those. At least you seek out to be high achieving and very above average.
I don't know if that's the case. And then throw on attempting to run ultra marathons on top of that.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on that yet.
And it's interesting, as I've reflected on a couple of my burnout phases, that's when I would start ramping up my training because it's good for the mental health. But then you're burning out the body at the same time. So I've spent a lot of time reflecting recently on what balance is, and I think for some people it's different. There's certain things you want to do in your life and you're going to do them, and at the end of the day you are who you are, and I'm going to continue to try to push on some things. I maybe have slowed down a little, taking some time to slow down a little bit and reflect on some things, and not running the distances I once ran.
So tell people, how far is an ultra?
An ultra is anything longer than a marathon.
And you have done how many, what was it, death race? You did a death race?
No, I was training
Okay.
for Sinister 7 to solo that. And my training was going really well. And I went over on my foot.
What's the Sinister 7?
I think it's a 100-miler, like out in Crow's Nest Pass. I think it's 100 miles. I think I was training for the 100-mile out there. And I didn't expect to actually finish it, but I was hoping to get to 100K. And I was up to about 60, 70K in my training, and went over on my foot. Kept running on it. Made things worse. And that was a few years ago, and it's continued to cause a lot of problems.
Yes.
And I tried again in this past summer to run a 44K, wrecked some things, did the 25, wrecked some more things. At some point, you just probably should stop.
Well, what do they say? It's life has a habit of putting the lessons in front of you until you're willing to learn them.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard that one before. I should.
Yeah, it'll come.
It'll come.
Yeah.
Really? Because I'm not getting any younger, Alistair.
It's never too late. It's never too late. So, what lessons from Attabotics do you hope to carry over into your next company?
Oh, there's so many. I learned so much there. It was such a great experience.
Because that was your longest tenure at a job.
Was it?
Optically,
You probably looked
from
at my
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Optically, yes.
I think it was 7 years.
Yeah.
Almost 7 years.
Because you said 5 years at the Oval, I think was
so,
one.
4 or
And
5
then,
years.
yeah, your own business is Tech Bent was 6 years. And then Organize Your People was another 5. So Attabotics.
Oh, and I love Attabotics. Honestly, I still think about watching that technology out in the wild, and it's such a beautiful thing to see it do its thing.
Wildly cool.
It's wildly cool. Yeah, that was really amazing. There's so much to carry forward. The growth was so intense, and the accomplishments were huge. I think one of the big things, and Scott and I talked about this a lot, is just celebrating the little wins along the way. You're just so head down, you're so in it, and you're trying to push forward every day, and sometimes you forget about those things.
Yeah.
And you think back at everything that was actually accomplished and what that team has done. continues to do is phenomenal. So I think taking the time to celebrate, which will create a little more balance in your life.
It would. It definitely
right?
give you a moment to be present and not just constantly seeking the next stage, which is very easy to come across in the startup world. It's always the next milestone. And that's why you often hear about the CEO founders that get to a point of acquisition or IPO and they're lost because they finally hit that goal, but they've never been present in that whole path. Yeah. They didn't get excited about the process. They were excited about the end goal.
Yeah. It's so true. So true.
One day, I'm going to press the buzzer at the New York Stock Exchange. That's going to be my goal. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe
You'll do it.
It'll be with somebody. It might be their company, and I'm just there as a witness. But I'm going to be there.
But one day.
Yeah, I remember walking the stock exchange floor with Scott when we did the cheese. I think it was the cheese.
Cheddar.
The cheddar. Yeah.
Cheddar.
Yeah, that was so interesting. But that kind of embedded in me that I want to do that one day. But we're going to go backwards because I got so excited to talk about something I knew a little bit about, which was Attabotics. But I want to get on the topic of App Carousel and App Direct because this is an area that a lot of people, because the initial starting point of this podcast is going to be my friends and then their network and those sort of things, and a lot of them are business minded. So acquisitions and stuff is topic of discussion. So when App Carousel got acquired by App Direct, what was it like to manage people through such a transition? Was it chaos or was it controlled chaos?
It was controlled there.
They had a system, is what you explained it as.
Well, and I think it was their two leads, the CEO and the COO, amazing humans. I can't say enough good things about these two people. They were CEO and CEO of App Carousel, which actually was originally W Mode.
Okay.
And it was interesting. In all my years of recruiting and working with early stage tech companies in Calgary, W Mode was one that I could never really find out much about. They were always super locked down. And so when they became App Carousel and then got acquired by App Direct, I got a phone call from my buddy Kevin Swan.
Okay.
Who is another amazing human in the tech space. Probably another person you need to have on your podcast. And Kevin was working at App Direct at the time, and they had just acquired App Carousel. And they needed somebody to come in and help them hire a bunch of people, and they had never had any HR in place before. And I went and met Bert and Rita, phenomenal humans. And I'm pretty sure it was mutual love at first sight. And so I don't know if they'd say that. Yeah, they would say that to this day. Rita and I are still quite close, and they were fantastic. They had a pretty tightly run ship.
Okay.
They'd been through their startup stuff, right? So this was more the acquisition piece, but they weren't becoming fully integrated into App Direct at that point. So
explain that.
So if memory serves, App Direct had acquired about 5 or 6 companies at around that same time, and they weren't necessarily integrating those companies into the App Direct culture at that time.
Okay.
So we were running separate at that point. And then slowly, I think I was there for 2 years. Towards my leave there, they were really starting to ramp up with App Direct and move into that culture. And I believe that's now, it's all under the same umbrella now. So it was interesting in seeing the shift there. And of course, you're going to lose some people through that, as with any merger acquisition. It doesn't always work out for everybody, because the reality is it does change things.
Yeah, there's that trimming of the fat, just being redundant roles, right? There's the different types of acquisition. They're doing it for the IP versus they're doing it for the human capital. So I don't know, was it more IP and the technology infrastructure that they're acquiring? Yeah,
and a bit of an acqui-hire in there as well.
Okay.
They had some amazing talent there.
Yeah.
And they were, like I said, they were locked down. It was wild. People didn't, like, their attrition rate was so low. Like, they had a really
App Carousel.
they had a really tight culture.
That's wild. That whole space has just been fascinating for me for forever. When I first started at Attabotics, just like reading up on the acquisitions. There was a book that I read this year that in October that absolutely blew my mind. So It's the CEO. He's a multiple-time CEO, Brad Jacobs, and he wrote a book called How to Make a Few $1 billion. And this guy had started, I think it was roughly, now I could be wrong, about 7 companies that were worth over $1 billion. And he started XPO Logistics, which we know from our warehouse robotics days. And then he started a waste management kind of company that was bought by Waste Management. And he started like some oil trading. He started, what was the other one? It was equipment rentals, but like construction equipment. Oh my goodness. United Rentals, I think was it.
Okay.
And his whole business model was finding underappreciated industries that needed a transformation, and then he gobbled up all the individual players, and he did it through acquisition, and that's how he grew it. And it was such an interesting book because he talked about the importance of basically as the acquirer and adopting different cultures and what that meant for the acquiree. And yeah, I think you should definitely read that because it would be an interesting one. Maybe more of a podcast for when you're walking and healing that ankle, but anyways, looking back, what's one of the things you learned from the acquisition that you still think about today?
Well, that's a good question. And I don't know if this is from my Carousel App Direct days, but just in general, and people that I've talked to, because I've always been very curious about mergers and acquisitions, and I haven't really been involved in them, but I really want to be because I'm.
You want to have a seat at the table for the acquisition?
Kind of, I do, but also really trying to understand why you're doing the acquisition, right? And 2, how can you streamline it? Any of my friends that I've talked to that have been through it, mostly
messy.
oil and gas companies, it sounds awful and it's years in the making. And there was a little bit of that at App Direct, but I think that team did a good job, right? Like they had put some systems in place and they took their time. And I think that was part of it, that it ended up being, in my mind, relatively successful. But I hear these other stories and they're just horror stories. I
think it comes down to the reasoning and then the whole, how extensively did the acquiree or the acquirer evaluate the companies? Because sometimes it's just, you shouldn't have made the acquisition at all.
No.
And who was it? No. Was it the acquisition of AOL from, was it Time Warner? Brad Jacobs talks about it in his book. It was one of the worst acquisitions in history. It was just before the .com boom or bust, and it was one of the biggest acquisitions in history. It was like $200 and something billion, and it goes down as the worst acquisition of all time, just because they didn't really evaluate the state of the market and where people were going with AOL, and now that's a dinosaur that doesn't really exist.
Exactly.
And you spent $200 and something billion discussing. I would be sick to my stomach if that was my idea. But I want to flow into a different section because this is something that I've always appreciated about you, about your balancing of life and your own personal goals and stuff like that. You've had such a diverse career, obviously, as you explore what's next. So what we haven't discussed is Jen is at a point of the in-between of exploring what is next. So how do you decide which industries or opportunities are worth kind of your energy in exploring?
No, that's a good question because you know that I'm deep in it right now. I parted ways with Attabotics a few months ago and amicably and lovingly. And
which is common. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing at all. So let's remove the stigma that it was anybody's fault.
Yeah, no, and Scott and I are still really close and it was an amazing experience. And so what's next? So I've been taking the time to do a little self-exploration, be a better human, be more present, be more authentic, all of the things that are here and now in front of us. And it's been a interesting experience, great experience, more time with my husband and my kids and my friends. I've been able to reconnect with friends that I'd lost touch with. I'd lost touch with a friend of mine. He's a CTO, VP engineering. We went for lunch this past week. It had been 9 years since we'd last seen each other. And we used to meet for lunch fairly regularly, reconnecting with some friends and deepening current friendships. And I've got a handful of really close, amazing humans in my life that have been there to support and guide me through this shift and trying to figure out what's next.
Okay.
And not only that, they hold my feet to the fire and they question me, and Alistair's one of them, right? Are you sure, Jen? Is this what you're thinking about? And because I get really excited about new tech. I'm like, oh my God, that's going to be amazing. Let's do this. I've got a couple of software ideas.
There you go.
That I'm not sure I want to be the entrepreneur again. I don't know. You know what, at the end of the day, what I've realized, what I really love is I love helping founding CEOs do their thing, build their company, get it off the ground, help it move forward, help them figure out who they are. I spent some time building out a CEO people architecture framework.
Yeah.
I've learned so much over the last 24 years.
Yeah. I wanted to highlight your experience, but I didn't want to drop the heavy form saying almost 2.5 decades.
Alistair! Wow.
It comes to all of us. Eventually it's going to catch me too.
Actually, I think I started my career in probably around 95. So.
You wanted me to say 3 decades? Okay.
Oh.
Anyways.
Wow.
So these people are holding your feet to the fire.
Yeah.
And that's helping you evaluate the opportunities.
It is. I had a past founding CEO reach out to me a few months ago, and he said, I need you to join. I need you to join the company. You got to come in. And I went, no, but thank you.
It's nice to feel wanted.
And it was lovely. And I'm having conversations with a few different folks, but there's a lot of exciting stuff out there right now. And I think at the end of the day, I want to work with great people. And I have amazing relationships because of the people that I've worked with. And I think people come and go out of your life for a reason, but the ones that stick are there for a reason. And I just want a little more of that.
That's
I want
awesome.
a little more of that. So what does that look like? I'm not sure yet.
Still exploring it.
I'll continue to talk to people and have conversations.
That's a big part of this podcast for me. It's nice to have differing individuals on each week, because then it gives me stuff to go home and research and stay on top of. Plus, it's just a nice way and it's an excuse to have conversations with people that I haven't chatted with in a little while. You and I are a little more frequent than some people. But I guess I can avoid this next question, because it actually sounds like this isn't so much your next phase is going to be a reinvention of yourself. It sounds just like it's a continuation of your story. You're just going to follow it.
Oh, I think so. I think so. I think there's a lot of things I'd like to go and learn to do, but I love what I love at the end of the day. So it'll just be a continuation.
Okay. Actually, that's a segue question that I want to know. Because you said there's a lot of things that you want to learn. Do you think it's beneficial to focus on things that you're not good at, or highlighting an expert in what you are good at?
I love this question. That whole, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Bullshit.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people asking about that for hiring practices.
Yeah, and you know how I feel about this question. And I think we all have weaknesses. That's really, we all do. I don't care who you are. You've got a weakness somewhere. I think being aware of it is great. I think trying to make it a strength.
Not the best use of your time.
Not the best use of your time. We all have something to offer, and let's focus on what we're really good at and enhance that.
That's great. That is great. Okay. How are you balancing right now your ambition with your self-care?
So I've had a lot of time for some self-care. Oof.
You needed it. Not like in a bad way, but like you've been going hard for, we're not going to say it. How long you've been going hard for?
And it was interesting because I reflected back, and even when I had my kids, I didn't take my full mat leave after I had my first daughter. My girlfriend and I had started up a business a month in after I had Kira. Not full time. There's a reason that business didn't go anywhere. I was doing it. I was off to meetings
You're in the trenches.
doing things. And then even after my second with Ayla. I took a little more time with her, and I did ease my way back in after I had the girls. I didn't go full on, but this is the first time that I've ever actually taken a break.
I think this is probably the longest period of time you've taken a break.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been interesting. I've had a lot of time with me. Yay, me.
Hopefully you like...
I like me.
Yeah.
We're a little bored.
A little bored.
We're a little bored.
Yeah, that's to be expected. But boredom leads to creativity. I'm a strong believer in that. It's amazing when you just you take an escape. You go off to, you went to Portugal. You take a moment to relax. The creativity just comes flooding in when you remove your everyday routine.
Yeah.
Your brain starts firing. I guess that's your gray matter starts really getting activated.
Yep.
Yeah. Boredom's good.
Boredom's
it's painful because of the way that society is structured and the instant notification and all of the chemicals we're getting from your phone going off, right? Mm-hmm. So boredom's good.
I did ask my one daughter if she'd be open to taking a social media break with me. Between Christmas
the youngest or the oldest?
The youngest.
Woo!
She said no.
I did recently 100 days. I did it twice this year.
You did, that's right.
I probably had about 200 days without social media.
And?
I'll openly admit it was probably the best thing I could have done.
I know.
Part of kicking a podcast off is obviously getting followers and getting attention. Mm-hmm. I now find myself searching for the devil's apps at random times of the day just because I feel like I have to be there, and you're reaching for those phantom buzzes, and it's wild. I felt free when I had those 100 days off. And so there's a side of me that I want to get somebody who does the promotion for the podcast, but then it goes against everything of what I'm saying about authenticity and showing up and all, and just showcasing myself. If I have somebody else do it or have AI do it, it's not the same. But
that's true. But also, you're doing a lot of things as well right now. As an entrepreneur, you also need to just really focus at what you're good at. Not saying the posting part you're not good at, but
I'm garbage at it.
Okay, so this is where
that's a place I've reflected and I know I have to improve on.
So this is hire somebody to do that or get somebody to do that, right? And I think that's
Kira,
this is your shout out, honey. Another client for you right here.
But it's true.
But it's true, right? Because then you said it earlier, the more free time or the downtime you have, then you can become more creative. Mm-hmm. And so if you're doing the stuff that you hate, when I started TechMed, the first thing I did was hire an accountant. Mm-hmm. The very first thing I did. Thank you, Chris. She was amazing.
Yeah, I could see you on QuickBooks. There'd be a Britney Spears moment for sure. Shaved head.
I would say which Britney Spears moment?
The free time, allowing myself for boredom. I came into a lot of free time recently, and it was crazy. Like instantaneously, I had all these ideas, and doesn't mean any of them are good, so we're not going to share them all. But yeah, I was just like, where's this flood coming from? And it was because I was legitimately just going for walks by myself. I was sitting on the couch without the TV on, just staring at the ceiling, thinking. And it was just like, oh shit, I should read about this. And then it spiraled. I had 3 little business ideas come up in 2 weeks, and then one I just decided to go after, which was this podcast.
Which is fantastic, right?
Yeah.
You know, when I noticed the big surge for me was in September. That second week in September, kids are back to school.
Yeah, you didn't have them as a distraction.
I didn't have anything, and all of a sudden my brain just was flooded with ideas.
Yeah.
And then I was tired.
Then you're tired. My brain hasn't worked like this in a couple of months. Yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
So at this point, we're actually wrapping up here. So I have, time flies when you're having fun with good people. What's an aspect about yourself that is a surprise for most people?
So I think this is my go-to when I get asked this, is I did work in the film industry for a stint. And my favorite person that I got to work with was Bill Murray.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And the movie that I was working on, Craft Services, had horrible coffee in.
Craft Services, maybe?
No.
Oh.
I'm not going to mention the name of the movie because it's not. Whatever.
Oh, it's been canceled?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But Craft services is the catering
on
a movie set. And craft services had horrible coffee, and I was lamenting to my good friend Bill. And I think honestly he remembered my name because his wife's name at the time was Jennifer. And so anyways, his people would send me coffee on set every day.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think...
Bill Murray, what a gem.
And I have an IMDb credit.
Oh, IMBD?
Yeah.
You're on there.
Mm-hmm, I am.
Woo! That didn't come up in the search.
See, it's very well hidden.
Yeah, I was probably searching with 2 N's for Jen, but...
Probably.
What?
Jen with 1 N.
Okay, so what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who feels too average to start their own business or make an impact? I ask all of my guests this.
I think that's a tough one. I don't know why I ever thought I could start a business. I think it's just being around, find people that will support you, right? Make sure you're hanging out with the right people. One of my very dear friend, she says, you can't soar like an eagle if you hang out with turkeys.
That's a good one.
And makes me laugh every time she says it. And I think, I know if you want to do something in your life, make sure you're around the right people that are supporting you and not holding you back. Mm-hmm. Because you'd be surprised at how many people say they're your friend and they're not your
crabs
friend.
in the bucket.
Yeah, and they're just exactly crabs in the bucket. So I think surround yourself with the right people who support you and who listen to you. They may tell you your idea is stupid, and that's valid too. My good friend Pat Lohr once told me one of my ideas was really dumb, and I didn't listen to him, but maybe I should have. I don't know. Anyways.
You tried.
Well, it's just, and being open, putting yourself out there, right?
Yeah.
Which is really hard to do, but start with a small trusted friend and work your way up. A lot of people want to help at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people out there that want to support you and help you.
Yeah, it's remarkable how intrinsically helpful people want to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's
true.
very surprising. And
it's the only reason I'm here on this podcast today, though, by the way.
Help, yeah. But how you phrase everything makes a difference. And I was talking to somebody about going out for funding, for VC funding. Mm-hmm. I said, have you tried just reaching out to venture capitalists and asking for their advice on, you're going to start a round. Mm-hmm. Here's what you're thinking about doing for your deck. And what you often find is they'll give you the feedback, but because it was an indirect approach too, they actually are just like, why didn't you ask me to invest in you? And then it actually turns the table. But this particular friend is actually getting a lot of feedback from the VCs because he's just reaching out and asking for advice. He's not going for the top dog at first, but he's getting somebody, and then they're like, hey, this is actually a really great idea. I want to introduce you to somebody who might make a decision on this. And
that's absolutely what you need to do. And in my experience, everybody's been very open and welcoming and always willing to have a coffee with you or a phone call.
That's awesome.
Right?
That's awesome. One last one for you. What inspires you to keep building, growing, and doing more even after such a long... Wow.
Are you going to bring up the 3 decades again?
No, we're going to cut this one out. But what inspires you to keep building, growing, and doing more after a successful and several years of experience?
Oh, I get bored so easily. Mm-hmm. Not very good at being still. Something I'm working on, continually working on. You've got one life to live. Mm-hmm. Live it well.
Your kids are running around saying YOLO.
Seriously.
Actually, I'm the
Urban
millennial.
Dictionary is my best friend.
Okay.
That's how I understand what they're saying to me. And then when I use their language back at them, they get really annoyed. Mm-hmm. I think I want to stay as youthful as I can and
stay busy.
Stay busy, stay active, keep your body going, keep your mind going. Mm-hmm. Be in the present, be authentic, be relevant.
And I think that's a good point to end on. So, Jen, I want to thank you for being such a great friend, jumping on this. You joke around that I'm the midway point between your kids and you, so I'm the buffer. But I've always appreciated the friendship. I've always appreciated the support. So I'm going to plug you in the show notes. So if anybody wants to reach out to you for potential jobs or anything like that, but they're looking at hiring. But everybody, this will be the final podcast for 2024. We're going to tune back in 2025 with new guests, but be sure to share this, put it out on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. We need your support, so let's get after it.